I don't know why you madmen liked the split screen, but we asked, you said you liked it, so we're going to keep doing it. Jen, we are now split screening, so neither of us have any chance anymore to be off camera or making obscene or profane gestures anymore. We're going to have to keep our game face on the entire time.
It's not a mystery why they like the split screen, Matt.
More of you.
Well, I mean, you talk more, and when every time you talk in the previous screen, the camera goes to you, and like, let's be honest, people would rather look at me, even if they'd rather listen to you.
No, I think most of our video views are just linked to my inherent sex appeal. That's the theory I have. I mean, I think you bring a niche, but I think I'm leading the charge.
I mean, you're a type. I'll give you that.
I am a type.
You're a type. Anyway, do you like my awesome? Speaking of sex appeal, are you loving the sparkliness that I'm bringing to this show at the tail end of my COVID infection? Is this like?
It's funny you're talking about your COVID hair here.
Yeah, like look at this thing. It's actually amazing. It's like I have enough hair for the both of us.
Well, I mean, I don't need much to tide me over. Anything would be an improvement. But when was the last time you had a haircut?
Oh, actually, probably only about 2 or 3 months ago. We had someone come to the house and do the haircuts.
You didn't get. We wouldn't have had much taken off then, did you? Like you had.
Oh no. Like it's not. I haven't gone to a salon where they've styled my hair. Like we have a lady who comes in and she does my kid's hair, and then while she's here for $15, she does a trim off the bottom.
And is this how your hair would be by choice, or are you just kind of rocking the necessity long hair? Because I remember you with much shorter hair.
And I've always had pretty short hair.
Yeah.
My husband really likes it. He's into it. He's digging the long hair. So I'm like, all right.
It's funny because I am notorious. I mean, I'm a man. I was gonna say I'm notorious for not noticing when the women in my life change their hair, but I think I could say I'm a man. So what I've learned to do is just massively overcompensate. Like if I notice a woman's hair looks the slightest bit different, you look great. I love it. I love what you've done with it. It really looks fantastic. It suits you. So when you had joked earlier that like you have COVID hair, it's great. I love it. It suits you. It's perfect. It really makes you pop. Like, I don't know. Like I've just learned over the years, the worst thing you want to have is your wife or your sister, your then girlfriend, like whatever, whoever it is going, what, you're not going to say anything? If they say that to me, I just pivot to immediately. It looks great. I love it.
You sound like a trauma victim. Like this is just like I need to.
It's happened a few times.
I need to compliment the women in my life, or they'll hurt me. They'll hurt me. Yeah.
No, they won't hurt me. They'll annoy me. That's worse. So I mean, we got a few items on the agenda. I guess we kind of have to start. I mean, 3 of these are going to blur into each other anyway. But let's start coherently. Convoy. It is just look at the clock. Thursday afternoon. The convoy has been moving through the greater Toronto area this afternoon. Not anywhere where I would notice it. The 401's a few miles from here, so I haven't noticed anything. But it's a sizable group of vehicles. We have boasts coming from convoy participants of 50,000 vehicles. We have police reports of vehicles in the range of dozens or hundreds. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea how many trucks are going to show up in Ottawa. I just don't. I think it's very hard to track this sort of thing. And in the absence of kind of comprehensive media, local market media all over the country, I don't know how many people are going to show up.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it doesn't actually take very many trucks to have a pretty disruptive protest is the thing, right? I mean, a couple of trucks can clog a lot of streets and you got cascading issues. But that being said, I mean, I think the thing that you and I are both watching is you had an excellent thread about the convoy, and particularly noting the fact that we're not just picking on, the odd super racist comment of somebody who joined, or like I don't care about that sort of stuff so much, but the actual statement of desires from the organizers themselves is bugfuck crazy.
Totally bonkers.
Totally bonkers, just completely beer hall putsch level. We're going to overthrow this democratically elected government and institute our own ruling committee kind of level shit.
Well, let me tell you what it explicitly says. I went through this in the thread for our viewers. So first of all these protests, leadership is always somewhat ambiguous. Like, I don't think there's like a convoy queen per se, right? So these statements being issued, you never know entirely how much of the organization or effort it represents. But there is a document called the Memorandum of Understanding, which has been purported to be kind of what the truckers are signing up for. I haven't checked today, but as of yesterday, it had 150,000 some odd signatures. And what the Memorandum of Understanding is, first of all, it's written weird. It is like, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. Like, it is trying to sound thoughtful and profound, but it becomes at times ungrammatical. And I don't mean the grammar is bad. I mean, it's ungrammatical. It, like, the sentences don't actually have meaning.
Agrammatical. It's words just mush in together like meat.
And when you go through the sentence, it doesn't actually say anything. It's just words, and the sentences have no meaning. But whatever. I'm going to stop being an editor for a second. What they're actually planning to do, and this is what the Memorandum of Understanding with 150,000 signatures on it says: they will arrive in Ottawa, a designated leadership group, and they've already listed their names because there's a document they've prepared in advance that all the particulars can sign. They will meet with the Governor General, Mary Simon. They will meet with a representative of the Senate. The Governor General will sign the document, as will the representative of the Senate. And then the truck rally organizers, combined with the Governor General and the Senate of Canada, will form a committee, members to be appointed by the truck rally organizers. This committee, in effect, to become the federal government of Canada.
And I think we should let them do it. This sounds phenomenal. This sounds great. I want to be ruled by trucker fiat. Perfect.
And yeah, and their plan would be within 10 days to issue a series of orders to the provinces and municipalities, unwinding all vax mandates and also reversing any fine previously levied under vax mandate. There's also something in there about the private sector, but remember, like I said before, it's just completely non-grammatical. I couldn't make sense of what the sentence was saying. I tweeted a screen cap of it, and I basically told people, if anyone can make sense of what this is, every version I got was different. So anyway, the truckers will become the new federal government. It's funny, people have been saying, Gurney, you elitist hack, don't make fun of the grammar of these working class people.
Oh no, we're not making fun.
We're not making fun of the grammar. Like, no. You could clean up the grammar, it would still be fucking bonkers.
It's still bonkers. So I guess the question and the problem here is, like, what happens when these guys roll into Ottawa and realize that none of this works that way, and that's not going to happen?
You know what? There's actually layers of problems here. First of all, yes, that is one of them. When these guys show up in Ottawa, what worries me is that, let's say it's a few thousand trucks, right? Like, let's kind of go, it's a sizable protest. After a couple of days, the less crazy ones will leave, because they're going to be like, well, I miss my kids, or I'm not hauling any contracted loads when I'm sitting here in Ottawa and I got a mortgage to pay, so I'm going to get back to work. The ones who will hang on are the diehards, who will be getting angrier and more frustrated every day. They're going to be alienating the locals, who are going to be yelling at them. Tension's going to go up and up and up. I don't know where that ends. I don't think that ends well. But I think we also have broader meta problems here. And let me tell you, I don't know if we as a society, and I include you and I in this, are we well equipped to handle people who have a really interesting mix of genuine concerns and batshit craziness? Like, how do we?
No, because we are in a hyper-polarized environment where everybody is going to divide up along tribal lines. And if you are sympathetic to the truckers overall, I mean, bonkers MOU aside, if you're sympathetic to the truckers overall complaint, you're going to overlook the crazy. And if you're not sympathetic to the truckers complaint, and you're like on the COVID more mandate, more blah 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 side, you're going to focus on the fact that these people are a bunch of white supremacists, blah blah, you know, like so there's no middle ground here. There's no compromise or nuanced position permitted in the current environment. I say permitted by whom, you know what I'm saying. Just like the current discourse is so just, you know, distraught down the line that
no one lasts long in no man's land.
No one lasts long in no man's land except us. Yeah. I guess it's just us. You and me alone in no man's land, where you and I can say pretty cleanly, like the vaccine mandates for the truckers was always a bad idea. Like well before the convoy, we were talking about this. I mean, you had food security experts basically being like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like you're just throwing an unpredictable variable into an already vulnerable situation. It could be fine. It could not be fine. We don't have any goddamn clue what's going to happen if you do this.
You just came
And
really
also,
close to quoting Star Trek First Contact, almost verbatim. An unstable element in an already critical situation.
You know what I mean? And that was why it was always a very bad idea. Is that essentially it was throwing essentially a volatile curveball that we just didn't know what the unintended consequences of that were going to be, and to implement a policy that bluntly will have no impact on Omicron spread. Like Omicron is going to be well done. Like truckers were not the problem here, and even if they were, it's 2 months too late to do anything about it. So I don't know whether or not the Canadian government put this in as a response to Biden's mandate. I don't know whether or not it's actually the Americans who are dictating this. Regardless, to what we can control here, it was a stupid, pointless thing that was always going to stir up needless amounts of hostility and trouble for no gain.
Yeah.
No gain at all.
That's
the problem.
If you want to find really controversial, heterodox, pushing the envelope takes, don't read Where I Work at TVO. We're pretty down the middle, moderate, like well researched. And my colleague John Michael McGrath and I, within days of each other there, basically, this was last week, I think, maybe earlier this week, reached identical conclusions. And we approached it different ways. But I wrote a column there where I basically said, if you look, and it's TVO, so it's Ontario, but I said, if you look at the number of vaccinated Ontarians, and you look at the number of people telling pollsters across multiple surveys, multiple companies, that they will never be vaccinated, we can currently divide the eligible Ontario population basically into two groups: those who will never be vaccinated and those who are now already vaccinated. Now, okay, you can always nibble around the margins, right? You can win someone over, you can do community outreach, you can overcome language barriers, things like that. And kids are going to be an issue. But in the big picture sense, the purpose of the mandates was to be a stick that drove up the vax rate. It is not going to go much higher. And John Michael McGrath wrote this week, or late last week, I don't remember, that Ford needs to figure out what he's going to do with the mandates. Is he either going to tighten the screws more to try and nudge another % or 2 out of the population, or is it time to wrap these things up? And I think the truckers aren't wrong about some of this stuff. I think they're wrong about some of it, but I think they have some legitimate grievances. But you wrap it up in this craziness, and it's really hard to talk about the stuff where they have a point and where they're crazy.
The other problem too is now also they've ironically put Trudeau in a situation where he can't back down. Like, honestly, if this it's a gift to him. If the convoy had never happened, and all of a sudden over the next couple of weeks, like people were running out of cabbage, you know what I mean? And this had there was every reason to expect the federal government could have quietly backed down on this, and maybe even the U.S. would have followed suit. Like, you know what I mean? Like this might have actually just gone away, but now they can't. Now they can't. I would also point out that something that's really interesting is that Trudeau's announcement that he's going to isolate with negative test with Omicron just as the truckers are rolling into town, that is a weak move, man. Like, just don't announce that you're isolating and don't meet them, and people will assume that you're ignoring them. But now that you've announced that you've gone into isolation, you've just fed the conspiracy theory with these guys thinking now that, oh, he's too scared to meet with us, blah, 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 blah. We must be having some impact.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like just it's just such a weak thing to do. He shouldn't have done that.
You know what? I got 2 broader points to make. First of all, let's talk Trudeau first. On my list, I have conservatives as well. We'll talk to them in a minute. For Trudeau, you know what this reminds me of?
What?
So let's, you know, I put it out there. The memo of understanding is fucking insane. It is nuts
Yes.
The truckers might have some legitimate grievances. Not all of them, some. Also,
Well,
we
and
as a
also
society,
it's not just the truckers too. It's like the truckers have coalesced around them a group of people,
yeah,
some vaccinated, some not. And I think the number actually isn't fringe, who think that, you know what, this is we've had enough, we've gone too far, it's time to get back to normal.
or at
Essentially,
least it's time to start backing down. Because again, like,
yeah.
I will like see the truckers are overreaching. They're saying we need to end all vax mandates. I think today, if a politician had came out, any province, federal, any party, and said, "Look, we're going to maintain mandates for healthcare workers. We're going to maintain mandates for nursing home and long-term care center workers, and certain industrial facility, maybe like correctional facilities. Like there are certain workplace
Packing
environments."
plants.
Yeah,
Those have been really notorious.
well, because we know, yeah, that's exactly it. We know where the transmission level is really high. We have experience with that now. If the government came out and said, look, we need to maintain mandates for hospitals, long-term care, prisons, meatpacking facilities, but you don't need it to get into your local pub to get some wings anymore. I think you'd have 40 million Canadians go, well, no, you'd have about 39 million Canadians go, okay, yeah, like we're on with that. Like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eventually,
that's
we're not
a good
even
compromise, sensible answer.
Eventually, we're not even talking about this yet. We're gonna have to start talking about masks, because we're not going to be wearing masks forever. So sometime between now and forever, we're going to stop wearing masks all the time. We're going to have that conversation too. Again, I could easily see it being a phased thing. Masks to be worn on public transit, in hospitals, when visiting long-term care homes, but movie theaters and bars, no. Like I
think to some extent masks will be normalized in a way they never were before.
During flu season, or if you have a cold, for sure.
But it's the mass mandates, right? It's the forced mass mandates. But yeah, I mean, I think that we're going to pivot to something like that.
And the truckers are going to slow it down.
Yeah,
and I was saying to somebody earlier, and you'll remember this, we talked about it a lot in the summer. You remember when, like, for like about a period of 12 hours, Trudeau decided to be empathetic during the election?
Oh yeah, he pivoted.
Yeah,
he went from being
because I remember he was at a stop, I think somewhere in Ontario. It was a sunny summer day, and he's like, these are our fellow citizens, we have to have sympathy for them and reach out for them. And then I guess they focus grouped it that night, and the next day he came out swinging, and he has never changed. That has been the strategy up until including this week. When these guys show up in Ottawa, they're not getting Captain Empathy, they're getting just watch me, Junior.
And what, like, cracking these guys' heads is going to go over really well among probably a
huge majority of Canadians. Yeah.
So, like,
you and I
don't favor a peaceful outcome here. The incentives favor a riot.
You and I have been talking about this, and it's funny how little of this conversation has permeated. Blowback. We've done the easy stuff. We've even done the hard stuff, and the public has generally gone along with it now. Every single thing left in the toolkit is not free. Like,
it will have to, and we've hit the diminishing returns of the toolkit.
And again, none of this should be taken as nihilistic. None of this should be taken as defeatist. If someone has a concrete proposal to make things better, by all means, make it. But people are fed up. We're into diminishing returns. And as I said at the very end of my Twitter thread, what we need is de-escalation. We need the politicians figuring out how we can step down from this, how we can get out of it. And I don't think they're mature or smart enough as a rule to do that. I think Trudeau and his PMO advisors are going to look at this and they're going to go, gift. We're going to go and we're going to campaign against these. We already saw it. Trudeau saying these guys hold unacceptable views. Okay. You know what?
And if you're thinking that the unacceptable views they're holding is that they're going to form the federal government, I would say, yes, those are unacceptable views.
Yep.
But, like, if your vision of an unacceptable view is it's time to ratchet back vaccine mandates, wait, what?
You and I, before we started the video, we were talking about something. I won't name names here because we were talking off the record, but you and I had noted before we got rolling an interesting development this week where more and more people are starting to say what you and I have been saying since December, which is that something like Omicron materially changed the game. and
Yep.
our strategies have to change. And you had said something I thought was smart. You said that other people took longer to process emotionally what we processed very quickly intellectually. You and I could be fairly,
because we're artistic and callous. So
I consider myself more of a Vulcan, but yeah, like I didn't have a long emotional. When Omicron came out, it felt like a kick in the balls. It was like, oh, another one. Like it affected me emotionally. But then I also said, okay, what does it mean? And talked to all my smart guys and said, what does this mean? And the message was, we can't contain this. Any containment strategy is going to fail. And the politicians, a lot of the public, even some of the smart commentators, they just weren't there yet for political or emotional reasons. And it's been really interesting looking at countries in Europe, one after another, saying we're done. Like we're lifting the restrictions. And here's the thing, we will die from Omicron. Like we are going to have a baseline level of COVID death from now until forever. It's just a new fucking disease that we have now. It's never going away. I made my peace with that. It sucks. I wish it was otherwise, but it's not.
fundamentally, this comes down to, and the risk is this. So I remember I got into some trouble earlier a couple weeks ago on Twitter for operating under the assumption that everybody had come to the same place that I had intellectually and emotionally, and I hadn't realized. And you and I had this conversation privately where I was just like, other people haven't emotionally realized this yet. Oh, that's why they're angry at me. I get it now. I'm saying the unsayable thing, and I didn't realize that it was unsayable yet. Sorry. But it's an interesting thing because it really comes down to a problem that we've had since the beginning of the pandemic, and that is, how do we get people to come to terms with death? How do we get people to come to terms
or powerlessness
with powerlessness? How do we get people to come to terms with the balance between the life you want to live and the consequences of the risk that takes? Like it's a really hard conversation because the answer is different for everybody. Like if you are one of those people who is rooted in particular worldview, you don't think there's anything after this, you're in the here and now of life, and you don't spend a lot of time thinking about your own mortality and what that means, what death means. And you're also probably one of those type A personalities who likes to be in control of their lives and likes to, you know, be in
Sorry, my
control
phone
of
is
their
ringing. Yeah,
environment.
go ahead.
That's fine. Like if you're one of those types of people, and a lot of our social elites would be categorized in this way, you know, type A, high control, fairly anxious, get her done personalities who don't spend a lot of time pontificating about their own mortality. This pandemic broke you in all the wrong ways. Like this hit you in all the worst kinds of places. I'm probably one of those people who I spend a lot more time thinking about, how should I say this, the balance between the life that I want to live versus my fear of dying. And my balance is probably differently skewed, where I'm like, there are conditions under which I wouldn't want to live. There are conditions of confinement or loss of control at which I would rather be dead. And if you skew a little bit more that way, your approach to the pandemic, I think, has been a bit more detached and a bit more emotionally less fraught. So just less fraught in some ways and more fraught in other ones, perhaps. But yeah, it's hard to tell people, like, you're just going to have to come to terms with the small a risk of death here, and that's just all there is to it. And by the way, you always have had to come to terms with that. Like every time you get into a car or do anything in your life, you take a small percentage risk of death. You're going to have to take the risk of your life being blown apart, and you have to do that in order to live a life, because the alternative is that you hole up in your home for the rest of your life and you're safe and cozy, but you have no real experience or human connection. So that's your trade. and it's not an easy or fun trade, but it's a necessary thing for people to really come to terms with. And if you have not come to terms with that over the course of this pandemic, the end of the pandemic is a hard thing to deal with emotionally, I think. Of course, I'm an autistic, callous, conservative asshole. So I mean, I probably also am not understanding other people's emotional states as well as I ought to.
That was incredibly interesting and really dark. Like normally I'm the
Oh,
dark one here. That was deep and dark. I mean, honestly, I don't mean to sound for a second like I'm dismissing it. I think that was a fascinating insight to your mindset and probably a lot of other people. I just think it's probably simpler though. I mean,
am I
the first
overthinking this? Am I overthinking the philosophical nature of death? I don't know.
possibly. I think in every prior wave there was stuff we could do. And I think there was a sense of agency, of activity, of mobilization, of effort. Even if you weren't participating, we could do stuff against this. I mean, we can boost, we can vaccinate more kids, but we can't stop it. And I think that's what's been hard. I think there has maybe been an illusion of active control for the population up until now that disappeared
Well, but
in December.
here's where I differ a little bit. I think that it's always been an illusion.
Possibly, but I think even the
I
illusion is gone.
Yeah, now the illusion's gone too. But like I think that when we really, zoom out, go bird's eye view on COVID 10, 20 years from now, we're not going to be able to have this objective like look at this right now. We're just not. But 10, 20 years from now, we're going to go back and we're going to be like, per capita death was probably more closely related to seasonality and population density than any other factor. You know what I mean? Like I think that we're probably going to go back and say that the impact that policy actually made on death and outcome was very, very mixed. I mean, unless you could go full China, full zero COVID. And by the way, the COVID zero policies failed everywhere they were tried in time. But like I think it's going to be a real mixed bag about how many of these public policy measures had a real impact above and beyond baseline population health, age, demographic. This is the things that we can't control.
We've talked about this a lot, just you and I. There is a missing ingredient to COVID that I don't think we understand yet. Like places like New York get smoked, but Boston doesn't. Like there have been
Africa. Case rates in Africa have not been.
And I think there is an explanation. I don't know if it's policy. I don't know if it's geography. I don't know. As you said, it could be climatic. And I think eventually we will figure it out. It's just we haven't yet.
The other thing that's going to probably play a role in all this is going to be what is the age of your buildings. Mm-hmm. Like if you're in a city that has Toronto older buildings than a newer city like Calgary, your rates are probably higher by virtue of the fact that you have older ventilation systems. Like it's probably like stupid shit like that.
Couple of variables that might not actually correlate, so guys in different fields would never think to put them together.
Exactly. And I think it's going to, like 20 years from now, someone's going to do the big meta study and they're going to be like, your per capita death rate.
They will find out what it was. Yeah.
What it was.
What's interesting is, sorry, Jen, give me 1 second. I will edit that. What's interesting, I think, about all of that is I think there's an over reliance on like the silver bullet, right? Like we will find the thing. It's going to be a couple of things, I think. I would say overall, the most demoralizing part of this from a policy perspective hasn't always necessarily been that I've been frustrated that the politicians haven't been stopping COVID. It's that I look at them flailing around with just no dignity, no plan, no coherence. And I realize even if it was something that could have been stopped or stopped more easily, they're just not up for it. Like COVID has not necessarily been devastating because of the mistakes we've made, but it has revealed that we are not well led. And we kind of loop this back to the truckers. So Toronto got nailed by that blizzard. We talked about it last week. It was 10 days ago today. Today, the street just to the north of me got cleared. Took 10 days. And I was talking with a buddy a couple days ago, and he said this tongue in cheek, but he said something that got me thinking. where he said, we got a military that can't fight. We have hospitals that can't handle an extra 600 patients in ICU. We got a city that can't clear the sidewalks, and we got schools that aren't open. And he said, why am I paying taxes? And it was tongue in cheek, right? But I've thought about that since, and you could add a lot to it. Like, we've got all those things. We have a government that can't maintain its official residences. We have somewhere between $1 and $300 billion in outstanding infrastructure deficits, either state of good repair or projects that have been approved but not funded. We have inflation running beyond target. We have a country, because of zoning rules, we can't build enough housing, and we've priced an entire generation out of home ownership. You start to understand why people are driving their goddamn trucks to Ottawa. And it's not per se the problems. It is the complete unseriousness of any attempt to fix them. We have cabinet ministers holding up signs with slogans. You cannot ask an entire generation, particularly on the housing front, to trust. Oh, don't worry, these guys will figure it out. Like, we talk about childcare, right? That's going to be the big childcare. Childcare is going to be the big Liberal accomplishment for this mandate, I think. I mean, at least we'll see what the future brings. But Liberals have been talking about childcare since I was a child. They got around to it after a generation. And as I said in my thread about the truckers, and I limited it mostly to the pandemic, we have seen failure after failure after failure. Did people not think there would be a consequence? Like, and there's always a fringe, there's always radicals, there's always assholes who want to burn it all down, left or right. On either side of the fringe, you've got the yahoos. But what we have done is discredit the middle, because the adults in the room could not manage their way out of a friggin' paper bag during this pandemic. When an anti-vaxxer says to me, oh, it's like, it's just whatever the bullshit conspiracy, it magnetizes you or something, I don't even bother engaging with that, because it's nuts. But when an anti-vaxxer says to me, the government has flip-flopped on masks like a dozen times.
2 weeks to flatten the curve, everybody.
The risk to Canada is low. Like, they've got a point on that. And I think the moderates don't understand the damage they do to themselves with their incompetence. You want to keep the fringes on the fringe? Be best. I'm going to channel my Melania there. Just be best. Just like have reasonable competency in the middle. Every time it takes 10 days to clear a road with a goddamn elementary school on it, with moms pushing strollers through snow that's this thick on unplowed roads, you are alienating someone who is going to believe you the next time they see something on Facebook talking about how Trudeau is Castro's kid or something, right? Like, competency, just basic competency, is the greatest defense against fringe madness, and we don't have it.
Not there.
So that's cheerful.
What's our take on this one? So what is our take for our dispatch? Because I
got to write my column. So my column is going to cover some of this. So we're going to have to pull out threads of this for the dispatch. Okay. I do want to mention the conservative element. We talked about the Liberals above, about how Trudeau will weaponize this. I just want to mention the Conservatives. We've seen a couple of Conservative MPs come out. Cheryl Gallant has done this. Pierre Poilievre has done this. Andrew Scheer, the former leader, has done this. I think some others as well.
Which is going to look great on the Conservatives if this thing turns into a riot.
It's going to, well, that, but also it's going to, the moment we find out one of these organizers has had a bad tweet before, it's going to be, hey, Andrew Scheer, do you support this? And that's not necessarily a credit on the media. We'll dig up dirt and then throw it at them, but it's going to happen. And if you're a politician, you're not ready for it, you're a moron. Part of me thinks that what we're seeing break out into public is the conservative civil war spilling out into public view here. Every time an MP comes out and goes, yay, truckers, it's another little cut to Erin O'Toole, who had a very reasonable op-ed in Post Media on Thursday. In fact, I think, where he just kind of called for calm. Like Erin O'Toole, again, pretty moderate, sensible guy. His party's part of his party, at least, is done with him. And I haven't had no one's leaked it to me yet, so I'm annoyed by that. I'm gonna have to go get a copy of it. The Cummings report on the Conservative election campaign came out Thursday. And meanwhile, we've got Conservative MPs who are not aligned with O'Toole taking positions that make his life harder. I'm not saying the Conservatives created the convoy, nothing like that. I think there's sort of like
seizing on an opportunity.
There's something I've been watching, which I think is funny. The conspiracy-minded mind, more of the progressive left, which is that, oh, look, the Conservatives through their Post Media proxies or their Conservative Party or Canada Proud have created this movement. They're not powerful enough to do that. What they do is try to like desperately ride. They try to hitch on to the momentum of something here and ride it. That being said, though, the one place I do get conspiratorial, I think a lot of what we're seeing is people putting a knife in O'Toole.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's an interesting note.
We'll put that into dispatch.
On the other politics note, the other thing I was going to point is the terrible Leah Gazan tweet where she was just like, I can't believe we're sending aid to a bunch of neo-Nazis in Ukraine.
She's an NDP MP, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm going to do a little bit more research on this before I write a little blurb, but like this has been another bizarre sort of lefty talking point for some time. The idea that the Ukrainian military is non-distinguishable from Atomwaffen, which is a sort of a neo-Nazi militia, is not quite right. So it's probably worth just clarifying and doing a bit of a fact check on that one. And then the last one I wanted to point out was, once again, we have Maxime Bernier sort of consciously directing cyber and online attacks toward journalists, in this case, Rachel Gilmore.
Of Global,
so, yeah. For me, I think I'm well beyond benefit of the doubt territory, and I think it is time to sort of put my voice to the idea that Maxime Bernier should not have a Twitter account. He now has a history of not just criticizing journalists, but I mean, the tone and language that he's using makes it pretty clear that he is actually directing attacks, online harassment toward journalists. I think that goes beyond Twitter term of service, and I think that goes beyond ordinary free speech protections. So I think that when you are now actively trying to, direct your trolls to attack your critics and the people reporting on you,
behind a block. See, that was something Rachel Gilmore had said. Bernier has Rachel Gilmore of Global News blocked on Twitter. He can't communicate with her directly, but by tagging her in the tweets, everyone else can. And that's a dead giveaway. That's purely about harassment. I had said to you before we started rolling, I have noticed something changing. So Rachel Gilmore of Global had been talking about this. Mercedes Stevenson, also of Global News, have been talking about this. Something I've noticed lately, you know what? I might just ask Mercedes. I might just text her, because she's been talking about, for women in particular, as you've mentioned before, the hate is often highly sexualized.
Yeah.
For me, it's not. It says, "Hey, you're bald." It's like, well,
this goes back to where we began this video.
It's just the attacks on elitists and all that stuff. But one thing I have noticed changing lately is that the attacks are, I'm not going to say they're angrier than they've been. And I'm not going to, look, I don't think they're worse targeting me. I don't think they're more hateful. What I've noticed is that they're more disassociated from anything in particular. It used to be, Gurney, I read your column, you're an asshole. Gurney, your tweet sucks, fuck you. What it is now is just, Gurney, go fuck yourself. And it's coming out of nowhere, right? From my perspective. So I think
it's more of a generalized attack against people who are perceived to be media elites.
Yes. And the thing is, if you hate my columns, that's fine. If you hate my radio show, that's okay. Like, whatever. Like, it's your level of hate does not affect my per word rate. I bill the same anyway. I don't care. But it is just like, it doesn't bother me, but I note it. And I don't think I'm getting more hate. I don't think I'm getting more virulent hate. I think it's just getting more disassociated from anything in particular. I think it is just a raw rage, and it's out there.
People are raged. Okay, so how do we actually break all this down into a dispatch?
I think what I have to do first, if you want to write the NDP thing about
The NDP
Ukraine,
thing.
you can, by all
It's
means.
not going to be a big detailed thing. It's
Yep.
just going to be a quick fact check on why she's needs to like let go of her RT subscription because it's not serving her.
I will do I'll do the O'Toole conservative element of convoy.
Yep.
For the broader convoy note, we need to figure out what my column is going to be, because whatever
Yeah,
like
let's
whatever
do your
doesn't
column
make it
and
into the
then-
column goes into the
Yeah.
dispatch.
Yeah, okay. And then attacking journalists, I guess I'll take on attacking journalists.
You mean writing about it, not leading
Yeah,
the charge?
I mean, it'd be counterproductive.
Yes, that sounds good. So you do NDP and journalists. I will, and Bernier. I would put Bernier in there specifically.
Yeah.
I will do the O'Toole element of the truckers. I'm also going to see if I can get somebody to leak me the damn report. And then for convoy,
We'll touch back after you do the column and see what's left on convoy. But I kind of like that idea of just like, we've been failing so much on so many of the different levels. This is a very predictable consequence. Chaos and anarchy and sort of inchoate rage is a predictable consequence of systemic failure and collapse.
Yeah, no, because you and I are isolated from many of the consequences of systemic failure. A lot of people aren't.
Yes. Yeah,
like when the schools got shut down in Ontario for an extended period, my son, who at the time he was in kindergarten, he never got the kickstart in education that kids that age are supposed to. Got him a tutor. Like we just said, okay, we're going to spend the bucks. My son is now beyond grade level in all the key subjects. You're some working stiff at the new Canadian community, just a couple of miles from where I live. You're not dropping bucks on a Zoom tutor. You don't have the bucks.
Well, and the other problem too there, and as we're going to see this in the long run, those disparities are going to compound over time.
20 years
from now. Because we know they do. We know that if you go into kindergarten a little bit ahead of your peer, you're a lot ahead by grade 3, you're a ton ahead by grade 12. It's just how this works. So
a few of us have the personal means and the societal capital, social capital, to stay ahead of the systemic decline. When the government becomes less and less able to do this, I get a guy to do it for me. You know,
also the other, and this is where I'm going to start quoting Piketty, but one of the other things that starts to happening when you start moving past an era of exponential growth and you begin to level out your economic growth, essentially social mobility collapses. You start to reestablish oligarchies. Mm-hmm. And we're starting to see exactly what that's going to look like. It's going to be, I mean, I don't even think that we're necessarily higher up on the chain. Well, maybe you are, I'm probably not, but essentially it's the upper class people start marrying within one another and compounding their wealth and advantages. And it basically becomes impossible to crack those systems because it becomes harder and harder to make real wealth.
Yeah. And that's going to start happening. And like my friend said, why do I pay taxes? Can't afford the houses. Schools are closed. Hospitals are clogged. Sidewalks aren't cleared. No military capacity. Inflation running hot. Supply disruptions in the grocery stores. Even though we still have enough to eat, there's weird shortages. You were talking before you couldn't find before we started filming. What was it you couldn't find today?
Oh, I can't remember no, actually I was at the grocery store today. It was in pretty good shape. I did find my favorite hot sauce for the first time since the pandemic started. That made me extremely happy.
Yeah.
I
found on Sunday, I tweeted this. My grocery store had everything I needed with exception of one item, but it was minor. I couldn't find like a pre-made sauce mix, so I made sauce the old-fashioned way, like something totally banal like that. Yeah. But the Sunday roast, oh my god, it was
$100,
$40 more expensive than I expected it to be. Yeah. And we'll see more of that. But here's the thing, we're talking about like kind of that. I can isolate myself from that because I spent the extra $40. It wasn't a deal breaker for me. It was the inconvenience of being $40 poor, but I still walked out with what I wanted. I think this is probably the core of the dispatch. Is it also worth mentioning in the dispatch how kind of this feels like early 2020, or should I keep that for the column? Like in early 2020, we knew there was a big story. None of us knew yet if it was going to be big. Right now, we have Ukraine. I don't know if that's going to be big. We have the convoy. I don't know if that's going to be big. We have inflation. I don't know if that's going to be big. It feels very deja vu to early 2020, where
Wouldn't it be really funny if all of these turned out to be nothing burgers?
yeah,
Like
but if that
3
happens,
months from
something else
now,
will blindside us.
yeah, maybe, but wouldn't it be really funny if like 3 months from now, it's like actually our supply chain issues more or less sorted themselves out.
Yep.
Russia backed down on Ukraine. The truckers, had a
Went
nice
home.
tailgate party and went home. And and Omicron basically had forcibly
It's done.
vaccinated everybody. It's done. And there's no like VOC on the horizon. I mean, there will always be variants, but there's no really scary VOC on the horizon. What if by March we're like, things are fine?
Things have never been better. But you know what? Maybe that's how we start the
By
dispatch.
March, by March, things are fine. What would we even do?
I don't know. We'll keep writing.
Well, about what? What would we write about?
We have lots to write about. Kenny's political future will be determined. Ford will be gearing up for an election.
Can you imagine if we were back to like writing about the UCP leadership review because everything's fine?
You don't want that? You don't dream about that? I think the readers would like that too.
No, actually, inflation's back down to 2%. We're good. We're good.
Have you actually just cracked in the last 2 minutes?
Maybe. I'm just thinking, like, wouldn't it be funny? I just would find it really funny.
It would be a nice problem to have. We'll put it that way. All right. I will hold off on convoy stuff for now. Let me figure out the column line first. But the thing that just gave you the giggles, let's put that in the dispatch.
What if everything's fine?
But a combination of deja vu / everything could be fine.
Okay, deja vu.
I'll write that, and then
everything.
You can edit it and giggle.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
Bye. No, I should eat some food.
Have you not eaten food today?
I had like toast and an egg.
That could explain the giggles.
That's probably it.
Well, thanks everybody.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.